Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. By far, the most desired position in the transfer portal during this spring window is on the inside of that defensive line. You have some of the better teams across the country really gunning hard for some of these defensive linemen. I want to dive into my favorite top 5 available defensive linemen that are still in the transfer portal, talk about what they bring to the table, talk about what teams might fit their skill set best. And I think the interesting conversation about these 5 names are some of them are different flavors, different kind of interior defensive linemen. You kind of have your big body, kind of one tech kind of guys. You also have your 3 tech penetrators, different fits, different styles. Really excited to get into this one. Before we do, and as always, just want to say thank you to you guys. It has been a blast the last week and a half talking the transfer portal, evaluating commitments. The amount of support y'all continue to show to the fellas truly does mean a lot. One, if y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Much more importantly, would love to hear some names that maybe I left off this list that you guys really like that's still available in the portal. And without further ado, let's get into this one. I'm going to start it off with what I think is probably a hot take in Derek Harman being my favorite interior defensive lineman still available in the portal. I think a lot of people are going to talk about Dominic Williams from TCU. We'll get into him a little bit later. Derek Harman just hits the transfer portal earlier yesterday, I believe. And this is a guy that, was in the portal during the winter months, was one of the more sought after ones in the portal during the winter. And the reason why I have Derek Harman as my number 1 guy in the portal is I think he can do a little bit of everything, and he's super dominant from a physical trait standpoint. 6'5", 320 pounds, carries that 320 pounds about as good as you'll see someone carry 320 pounds. He is not a lot of bad weight. He's a phenomenal athlete for that size, and he's a guy that can do it all on the inside of that defensive line. 20-plus run stops in 2023, can play the 3 tech, can play the nose. He also gives you that pass rush juice on the inside too. 18 quarterback hurries, a 10% pass rush win rate. When you're evaluating guys on the inside of that defensive line, in my mind, you're looking for 2 traits that really stand out. One, what can they do at the point of attack against the run? Can they take on double teams? Can they be a force in the run game? That's probably the first thing that you're looking for those guys on the inside of that defensive line. Derek Harman certainly checks that box, but what I think separates him from a guy kind of like Dominic Williams is I think Derek Harman probably offers a little bit more juice as a pass rusher too, and he's versatile. He's a guy that at 6'5", 320 can certainly play that nose technique, but a guy that can also play the 3 tech because he's a phenomenal athlete for his size. Derek Harman, my favorite interior defensive lineman still available. Now, going to number 2, this is where I go with Dominic Williams. And what's special about Dominic Williams, and I know as much as anybody as being a Michigan fan, that this is a guy that is not necessarily going to light up the stat sheet. He's not going to have 10-plus sacks, 15 tackles for a loss. That's just not the kind of player he is. And more importantly, going back to his time at TCU, that's not really the position that he was put in very often at TCU. They run that 3-3-5 defensive front where, Dominic Williams, over half of his snaps came from that true nose tech alignment right over the center. And so what do you get from Dominic Williams? A lot of double teams, not a lot of ability to penetrate, make a lot of plays behind the line of scrimmage, not put in positions where he could be an elite pass rusher. The reason Dominic Williams is so coveted in the transfer portal is this is a guy that is elite against the run, and it doesn't necessarily show up in tackles and run stops. It shows up on the film where he's eating up double teams at that nose tackle spot. And it's not a coincidence that the linebackers play much better football behind Dominic Williams because he keeps them clean. He wins at the point of attack. I think what's special about Dominic Williams is he's a guy that is going to make everyone around him play a little bit better on the defensive side of the football because of what he can do winning at the point of attack. And again, I think a reason I have him at number 2 is I kind of almost talked myself into, quite frankly, putting him at number 1 is I think Derek Harman just gives you a little bit more dominance and upside in terms of creating tackles for loss, creating negative plays, which I kind of put a lot of stock in. I think that's how you win games at the college football level. Negative plays, sacks, putting teams behind the chains. That's really important to me. So I give Derek Harman the edge there. But Dominic Williams, a guy that is a really good player and extremely coveted for good reason. Next one that I really like is Simeon Bar Jr. from Michigan State. Michigan State really getting gutted on the defensive line. Simeon Bar Jr., the reason I have him at number 3 is for my money, probably the best pass rusher that we're going to talk about. Maybe one other guy, 17 quarterback hurries, a 14% pass rush win rate from the inside. Extremely impressive numbers. Has been very productive for Michigan State over the last couple of years. The reason I have him at number 3 is that I don't think he's elite at the point of attack in terms of stopping the run. And that is probably the thing. You look at a lot of teams that need interior defensive line presence, LSU, USC come to mind. Why they want that presence is they want to be able to stop the run a little bit better, right? They have the guys on. Brian Kelly's been very vocal. We've been very vocal about Lincoln Riley. They have the edge rushers. It's actually funny because both those teams are playing each other week 1. Both of those programs have the edge rushers to make it happen. Both of those programs want bodies on the inside to better be able to hold up against the run in the Big Ten, in the SEC. Simeon Bar Jr., don't get me wrong, is certainly going to help in that department. I don't think he's as good as guys like Derek Harman and Dominic Williams. But at the end of the day, I mean, you really want to covet guys that can get a pass rush from the inside. I do think that's where Simeon Bar Jr. really does separate himself. I have him as the number 3, currently available interior defensive lineman. Going to number 4, and a guy that I've been banging the table for quite frankly, the last 12 months before he was even in the portal. Jared Harrison-Hunt, coming from Miami. I thought he played phenomenal football for the Hurricanes in 2023. All that talk about Miami's elite defensive line, Jared Harrison-Hunt was second in the team in quarterback hurries next to Ruben Bain. This was a guy that a lot of conversations went to Ruben Bain or Leonard Taylor on the inside. Jared Harrison-Hunt was phenomenal for Miami in 2023. He's a very good pass rusher, 22 quarterback hurries with a 9.5% pass rush win rate. The reason I have him at number 4 is this is probably where he struggles the most, is he's not necessarily giving you that elite big body on the inside that a lot of these teams are coveting. Again, going back to that conversation, a lot of teams that are looking for interior defensive linemen, they're looking for 300-plus pound bodies. Jared Harrison-Hunt plays much bigger than he is. I am a massive fan of Jared Harrison-Hunt. Wouldn't have him in my top 5 if I wasn't, but doesn't give you that necessarily that body that Derek Harman or Dominic Williams gives you. Big fan of Jared Harrison-Hunt. Sounds like Florida State might be in the running for him, but I think USC, LSU should certainly be checking out Jared Harrison-Hunt. Now, my last player I want to talk about, and this is a guy that really does intrigue me, is CJ West, who I think, one, gives you a lot of versatility. This is the ideal nose tackle frame, right? 6'2", 315, fire hydrant build, elite against the run, 24 run stops, 0.9 yards of average depth of tackle. This is a guy that I think a lot of people like more than I do. I like CJ West. I am a massive fan of him. Again, wouldn't have him in the top 5 if I wasn't. My question about CJ West is twofold. He's been very good against the run in the MAC conference, doesn't give you a ton of pass rush juice. My conversation with CJ West is going back and looking at some of the numbers, watching a little bit of Kent State. I'll say hand up, don't watch a ton of Kent State football in my free time. CJ West didn't play his best games against Power 5 competition, right? Probably 2 of his worst games were UCF and Arkansas on Kent State's schedule. That's a little bit concerning because whenever I'm looking at these group of 5 transfers, I want to make sure, all right, our biggest question is, all right, you might have played really good at the MAC conference. Can you play really good in the SEC or the Big Ten? That's probably the big question that we have. You go back and look at the numbers. His worst games were against Power 5 competition. So although he was a great player in the MAC conference, one of, if not the best defensive lineman in the conference, I think there are still some questions that, hey, can you make it happen at the Power 5 level? That's kind of what I'm looking for in CJ West. And again, I like CJ West a lot. I think he should be a top target for every program that needs an interior defensive lineman. But that's why I have him at number 5 in my rankings. These guys are going to get paid. Like, you look at some of the top teams in the country, they're looking for these kind of bodies. It's a massive need for teams like LSU, teams like USC, some of the more attractive destinations and big players in the NIL world that we see. We'll see where they go. Really excited to cover it. Appreciate you guys rocking with the fellas. Again, would love to hear from y'all in the comment section, and we'll talk to y'all later.